talk about raising finance. So we're going to talk about the why. We're going to talk about the what, right? What kind of business are you running? Where? What stage are you? And then we'll then finally talk about how do you actually raise money. So let's start with the why of your business. And just move to the next slide. I'm going to skip some slides just because of our time. So the why of our business is really important. And that is something that, I have personally been, spending a lot of time just thinking about. And really trying to answer, why is it that a lot of us, just Christians, we run businesses, but we don't seem to do as well as other people, right? Like, why? What is that big driving force? And I think that I started to really just double down on, for many of us, the why of our business is not clear, right? Why are you actually running that business? Why are you not just doing a regular 9 to 5? And why is it you who needs to run that business? And one of I think my major cues is from Matthew 6:26, and I really like the way the Message version puts it, right? And it's really around where Jesus was, talking to his disciples and telling them about the birds of the air, right? I think the way the Message version really puts it is, if you decide for God, living a life of God worship, it follows that you don't fuss about what's on the table at meal times or whether the clothes in your closet are in fashion. Now, the more important bit is, there's far more to your life than the food you put in your stomach, more to your outer appearance than the clothes you put on your body. Look at the birds, free and unfettered, not tied down to a job description, careless in the care of God. And you count far more to him than birds. And I think the biggest lesson for me from that is really that God is trying to tell us that the reason for your business is not because you want to make money. It's not because you need a job. It's not because you couldn't find a job. It's not because you need to make ends meet. And I think that's one place where many of us ultimately get it wrong, right? We actually, many times we start a business not because there's a core why, but just because it's the next best alternative. And so, there isn't too much enough time to elaborate on this, but I really want all of us to go around and go back and just really meditate on, why am I actually running this business? Is there a higher purpose, a higher reason why I'm running the business beyond just the mundane, I need to feed myself, right? And, questions you can ask yourself is, why does my business exist? What problem am I solving? Am I the right person solving this problem? And also, because we're Christians, is there a kingdom agenda for my business? How is this business relevant to God's agenda, ultimately? Because everything that we do ultimately is for God's purpose, right? And so, you also need to ask yourself that question: is my business relevant to God's agenda? The second bit on the why is then setting your vision. And very similar here, the one admonition that I want to leave us with in setting your business vision is, please think big and be audacious in your thinking. That's another thing that I think I've seen a lot of us Christians struggle with, is the size of our ambition doesn't match the size of our God. And many of us really, again, we're doing this business just because, I just need something to get by. But I put a few things, right? God doesn't think small, right? So his children shouldn't think small either. Right? I want us to really think big. I feel like, many times I see that, the folks that we call the non-believers are a lot more audacious. They tend to dare things much more. And a lot of us will call our steps. It's almost as if we're scared of what if we succeed. And so I want to admonish us to really, within whatever business you are, set a big vision, right? Ephesians 3:20 is, essentially says, and I think if I just read it out, I think it's a very popular, verse that I think a lot of us know. But I think the way for me, I personally always try to figure out, how are these verses, relevant to me as a business person, as an entrepreneur, right? And I think we all know, basically says God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above what you can ever ask, think, or imagine. And the way that I interpret that is, no matter how big my goals are, no matter how far I think I can imagine, where my business can get to, what this verse is telling me is that no matter how big I get, God can even do more. So why limit yourself? Right? There's however big you think you can imagine yourself getting, it's basically telling you that God can actually do more. Because we're only a very small fragment of our own existence. And so I think it's, not to belabor the point, right? I really want to encourage all of us to really think big in our vision and be audacious. But at the same time, as you think big, it's also important to know that big goals, big vision also requires big effort. Right? So the question to ask yourself as you think big is, are you also ready to give it the effort that it requires? Do you really, really want it? Do you really, really want the success? I think all over the Bible, there's so many examples of, people that really, really, really wanted it. And I think that's something that, again, is very lacking in our generation, is that we seem to have lost that desperation, right? That real drive to really want things, right? When I, again, reflect, for example, on the story of, where Jesus, turned 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, right, to feed 5,000 people. There's one